Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 17th October 2019. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start this discussion. This article on page number 10 talks about the India-US relations in the present changing times. In this, the author has highlighted that it is a common fact that the world is moving away from globalization and multilateralism, and the world is presently embracing the policies of protectionism, isolationism, and unilateralism. Now, we note that various acts of protectionism are visible in the trade war which is going on between US and China, and also various economic issues between India and US. And in this, both the countries are imposing various kinds of barriers for trade between the two countries. So this shows that the globalization is now taking a back seat and the countries are now following the policies of protectionism, isolationism, as well as unilateralism in the case of superpowers. Now, by unilateralism, we mean that powerful countries like United States of America have been taking various decisions on their own without taking into consideration the issues of the partners. So in this background, the author has highlighted the challenges in front of India's foreign policy for handling the relations with US in these changing times. So first, the author has dealt with the history of relations between India and US. What were the points of cooperation and what were the points of disagreements between both these countries. Also, the author has highlighted present points of concerns and has highlighted the unpredictability in the United States' foreign policy and how it has impact on India, and ultimately he has highlighted what caution should India take in such circumstances, and also India should take the advantage of these opportunities which are created by the new situations. So this will fall under General Studies paper 2 under the topic International Relations. Now, as the world today is moving away from the process of globalization and multilateralism towards the process of protectionism, isolationism, etc., there are various challenges in front of India's foreign policy. And these challenges are also posed by the unpredictable behavior of the US's foreign policy. So in this regard, the author has highlighted that should India follow a policy of non-alignment or multi-alignment, or should India become an ally of one of the superpowers? So in short, the author has highlighted that the situation and challenges in front of India are similar to the one which were posed during the Cold War era. And at that point of time, India adopted a policy of non-alignment. Now, why did India adopt such a policy of non-alignment? So here you should note that after the Second World War, the world was divided into two military blocs, in which one was led by the United States of America, and it represented the political system of democracy and economic system of capitalism. On the other hand, the other group was led by USSR, or the erstwhile USSR, and this represented the political bloc and the economic bloc of communist countries. And the background of the Cold War politics and the policy of non-alignment has been highlighted in the NCERT of class 12, that is Politics in India Since Independence. And in its chapter 4, it has highlighted India's foreign policy. So it reads that the Cold War era was marked by political, economic, and military confrontation at the global level between the two blocs which were led by the superpowers. That is, one was led by the United States of America and the other was led by the erstwhile USSR. Now, these two superpowers, United States of America and the USSR, wanted the countries to ally with themselves. And in that scenario, most of the countries aligned with one of the superpowers. However, India did not ally with any superpower and adopted the policy of non-alignment. And this policy advocated distance from both the military blocs which were led by US and the USSR. So in short, India wanted to keep away from the military alliances which were led by US and the Soviet Union against each other. And this was the official foreign policy of India at that point of time. And this was also reflected in one of the statements by Jawaharlal Nehru in a letter which he wrote to KPS Menon in January 1947. And he highlighted that our general policy is to avoid entanglement in power politics and not to join any group of powers as against any other group. So, India adopted an independent foreign policy which was reflected in its policy of non alignment. However, this policy of non alignment did not mean that India did not have relations with other foreign countries. So, in this regard, this non alignment was also a reflection of the multi alignment. And India aligned or maintained relations with different countries according to its own needs at that point of time. So, in this background, the author has highlighted that should India follow a policy of non alignment or should India become an ally of one of the superpowers? And as highlighted further, the United States' foreign policy has been very unpredictable in the present times. So, should India completely ally with the United States, or should India follow a policy of non alignment and keep its engagement with other countries as well, and should pursue its own personal interests? So, after this, we will first look at various points of cooperations and disagreements between India and United States in the past till the present times. And after that, we will look at the present points of concerns between India and the US. Now, this article is a very broad article about the India-US relations, and it highlights various issues and aspects that have been in news. For example, it talks about the S-400 missile defense system. It also talks about the INF treaty, etc. And all these aspects have been covered previously in the DNS videos. However, we will try to understand this article from a very generalistic point of view and how India-US relations should be maintained in the present times. Now, in the past, there have been various points of cooperation between India and the US. And the first one was reflected in India and the US's civil nuclear deal. And this was signed in the year 2008 and is also known as the 123 agreement. Now, for such a nuclear trade deal, a country needs to be a member of the Nuclear Suppliers Group or the NSG. Now, here it should be noted that India is not a member of the NSG. However, it was because of US's assertion the NSG granted a waiver to India in 2008. And this waiver was granted for trade between India and US for civil nuclear installations. However, the military nuclear trade is still exempted. So India received this NSG waiver because of United States' assertion. And that is why this India-US civil nuclear deal could be signed. And this shows one of the highest point of cooperation between India and the US. Further, because of the changing circumstances, US is trying to change its policy in the Indo-Pacific region. And that is why it considers India as one of the important partners for defense cooperation. And accordingly, it has signed various agreements for military intelligence, etc. And these include Communications Compatibility and Security Agreement, which is known as COMCASA. Other one is Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, that is LIMOA, and the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement, that is BECA. So all these agreements have been signed, keeping in mind the present changing situations in Indo-Pacific region, and the US considers India as one of its important military ally in the Indo-Pacific region. However, besides these points of cooperation, there are various disagreements between India and the United States. And first in this line is that US wants the World Trade Organization to remove the developing country tag for India. Now here you should note that the World Trade Organization promotes multilateralism in the trade relations between various countries. And for promoting this multilateralism at the global level, WTO provides certain protections to the developing and the underdeveloped countries. And one of the contentious issues between US and India at the WTO platform was related to the food subsidy which India provided under its National Food Security Act of 2013. And US asserts that this developing country tag of India should be removed at the WTO. However, India is still asserting that it should be kept in the developing category only. Another point of contention between India and US lately has been the trade war. And this is reflected in the various tariffs that have been imposed by the United States for imports from India like the steel and aluminium. Secondly, it has also removed the generalized system of preferences which it had provided India in terms of trade. And that was benefiting India as far as its trade with the US was concerned. And besides these two, there is perpetual issue of the H-1B visa for working professionals in United States. And the US is trying to make this procedure for H-1B visa strict for the Indian applicants. And that is also one of the points of contention between India and US. Further, historically in the year 1971, when India was at war with Pakistan, the US had supported Pakistan openly by sending its naval fleet towards the Indian Ocean. And this was the highest point of confrontation between India and US in their historical relations. However, this situation was managed because India had already signed a treaty of friendship with Russia or the USSR. And that helped India avoid any sort of confrontation with the US during the Indo-Pak War of 1971. So all these points highlight that there have been various points of cooperation. However, both these countries have had their own set of disagreements in the past. Now, after this, let us look at the present points of concern between the India-US relations, and also how has the US's foreign policy been unpredictable and what caution should India take in this background. Now, some of the immediate and the present points of concern between the India-US relation is that the United States of America has warned India against procurement of defense equipments like the S-400 missile defense system from Russia. And also the US wants India to send its military forces to Afghanistan to handle the situation after the US forces move out of Afghanistan. However, India has opposed this move of sending in its forces in the Afghanistan because India doesn't believe in interfering in an internal matter of any other country. Although India is providing various defense equipments to Afghanistan and is also ready to train its military. Further, there is unpredictability in the US foreign policy and which is reflected by various events that have taken place in recent times. The first in this line is the abandonment of the Kurds in West Asia. Now, Kurds are a community in West Asia which are fighting for creating a new nation by the name Kurdistan. And these Kurds mainly inhabit border areas of Turkey, Syria, Iraq, etc. Now, the US in its fight against the ISIS or the Islamic State had supported the Kurd fighters. And these were one of the important allies of United States in their fight against the Islamic State. However, once the threat of Islamic State was over, the US has abandoned these Kurd fighters. So in this background, the author has highlighted that this abandonment of the Kurds in West Asia should warn India about its policy towards Afghanistan. This is because if United States of America moves out of Afghanistan, the Afghanistan will be in the hands of Taliban. And that will have impact on India's northern part because it is one of the regions which is affected by terrorism and insurgency. So if Afghanistan falls in the hand of Taliban, it will further lead to problem of terrorism in the region. The second point of unpredictability is the United States' policy towards Pakistan. Now, US has many times criticized Pakistan for its issue of terrorism. However, it has also shown its inclination towards Pakistan, and the President of the United States of America has said that the Prime Minister of Pakistan is his friend in need. And the US is showing its support towards Pakistan because it wants to move out of Afghanistan and wants the Pakistan to handle the situation in Afghanistan. So here also, the predictability in the US foreign policy is missing. And that is because Pakistan is known for its state-sponsored terrorism, which India has accused Pakistan of. However, despite that, US wants Pakistan's support in case of Afghanistan. So this shows a lack of clear policy towards Pakistan by the United States of America. Further, the United States of America had lobbied for a nuclear deal with Iran. However, it all of a sudden moved out of this nuclear deal and has imposed sanctions on various countries which are dealing with Iran. Now, here it should be noted that Iran used to be one of the important oil trading partner of India. However, because of these sanctions, it is impacting the trade between Iran and India, especially in terms of oil imports. And last but not the least, the US has withdrawn from the INF treaty, which banned the testing of middle and short range missiles. And this was a treaty between US and USSR for not testing the middle and short range missile systems. However, the US has unilaterally withdrawn from such an INF treaty. And this has started debates about a Cold War like military race in Asian region. Now, because of such unpredictable nature of the US foreign policy, the author has suggested that India should be mindful of such unpredictable US foreign policy. However, at the same time, it should capitalize on the present issues of protectionism and retrenchment by maintaining its time-tested policy of non-alignment and the strategic autonomy, which means that India should avoid becoming an ally of the United States, which is a superpower, and that is mainly because of its unpredictable foreign policy. However, India should follow multilateral engagement with various other countries, and it should also focus and rely on its time-tested friend, that is Russia. Further, the unpredictable nature of US towards the Kurds and Pakistan should warn India towards its policy towards Afghanistan. However, India can be an effective supplier of goods in the wake of trade war which is going on between India and China. So in short, the author suggests that India should follow its time-tested policy of non-alignment. India should take advantage of the opportunities which are created by trade war between US and China, and also by the policy of protectionism which is being adopted by the United States of America. So these are few points which have been discussed in this article, and with this let's take up the next article. This article on page number 10 is related to the issue of data localization. And this has been written in the context of recent RCEP negotiations, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership negotiations. Now you should note that the RCEP negotiation is going on between the ASEAN and its 6 free trade partners. And these include India and China also. So in these RCEP negotiations, the focus is mainly on preventing the member countries from imposing the data localization norms on the foreign companies. And it aims at allowing free flow of data across borders of the member countries. Now, as the RCEP is aiming for free flow of data across borders, the author has cautioned the government of India to be more proactive in these negotiations, and it should focus on preserving its sovereign right to formulate its own and independent data policy. So this will fall under General Studies paper 3 under the topic Economic Development. So in this article, we will try and understand the importance of data in the new global order. Further, what is meant by this term data localization, and what are the present norms regarding data localization in India. And after this, we will look at the benefits and concerns related to the issue of data localization. So first, let us look at the importance of data in the new global order as highlighted by the author. So first is that data is considered to be the new oil. So it enjoys the same importance which the oil enjoyed in the previous times. Now, in this regard, the technological giants like the Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook have been using the data generated by their users to make huge profits. And the combined valuation of these technological giants stand at about $800 billion, which is way greater than the overall GDP of even Saudi Arabia, which is a major oil giant. Further, the personal user data is considered to be one of the most important ingredient of the Industrial Revolution 4.0, which is being led by the big data and artificial intelligence. Now here it is important to note that with the advent of Industrial Revolution, Britain became the superpower of the world and eventually it colonized various countries across the world. So similarly, it is said that the country which enjoys hold or control over the personal user data of people will enjoy global economic and geopolitical dominance. And this has led to the fears of digital colonization on the similar lines of the past century colonization. Now, presently, the USA and China have taken a lead in the Industrial Revolution 4.0 by focusing more on big data as well as artificial intelligence. Now, as China and US are focusing on these two aspects and are ushering in a new era of Industrial Revolution, that is Industrial Revolution 4.0, it has raised concerns regarding India. And because of this, India will have to depend upon these two countries, that is USA and China. And if India becomes dependent on these countries, it will lead to digital colonization of India. So in this background, let us look at what is the importance of data localization and what are the norms in India regarding data localization. After this, let us look at the benefits and concerns regarding data localization. Now, data localization essentially refers to the storage of data within the borders of a country, which means that if the data relates to Indian citizens, it should be stored on the servers in India and should not be stored beyond its borders. So this simply means that the data should be stored where it is generated. And India has been in favor of this data localization policy, which is reflected in its various norms. For example, the draft e-commerce policy has mandated the data localization norms for e-commerce companies like Flipkart, Amazon, etc. Further, regarding various payment system operators, the RBI has mandated compulsory storage of payment related data in servers which are physically located in India. So both these policies and norms are aimed at storing the data in India and protecting the data from foreign entities. Now, besides these two initiatives, a panel was created by the Government of India which was named as Sri Krishna Panel, and it had also recommended for data localization norms in order to ensure the privacy of sensitive user data. So India asserts that data which is generated in India and relates to its citizens should be stored physically in India in servers. And it should not be stored by digital giants like Amazon, Flipkart, Facebook, Google or Microsoft across its borders. Now, what are the likely benefits of data localization? So the Economic Survey of 2018 and 19 has a chapter related to this data protection. And the title of this chapter is Data of the People, by the People and for the People. This simply means that data should be considered as a public good. And in this line, this data should be accessible to the Indian public. And also, the government should be able to utilize this data for creating policies which are related to education, health, etc. So in short, this will help in providing evidence-based policy making. And further, by data localization, the governments can prevent the commercial exploitation of this data by the foreign companies. Now, this chapter on data localization of the Eco Survey has been discussed in a video related to Eco Survey. So you should go through that video. The second benefit is that it will boost the law enforcement related to the abuse and misuse of data. So it will simplify the process of detection of crime and will also help the authorities in gathering evidence for prosecution. And this is mainly because the authorities can easily access the data which is available within the country. However, it would be difficult for the authorities to procure the data from foreign entities, which might take time and will reduce the effectiveness of these law enforcement authorities. So that is why this is also one of the benefits of data localization norms. The third benefit is that the data localization norms aim at reducing the vulnerabilities of the citizens. Now in this line, one of the important case that happened was related to a company known as Cambridge Analytica. And this Cambridge Analytica tried to misuse the global MNC data for manipulating the public opinion. and also impacting and manipulating their voting behavior. So this event shows that such kind of manipulation can lead to erosion in the democratic values, as it is leading to impact on the public opinion in their voting behavior. And that is why bringing in the data localization norms will reduce the vulnerabilities and will ensure the digital sovereignty of India. Further, by ensuring the data localization norms, it is likely to give thrust to the Industrial Revolution 4.0, which is being led by the research in big data and the AI, or the artificial intelligence. Now, if the data is stored locally in India, it will lead to increased FDI in the digital infrastructure and is also likely to create high skilled jobs in the field of big data and the artificial intelligence. And this can be one of the pillars in fulfilling the government of India's aim of converting Indian economy into a $5 trillion economy. And further, by storing the data locally, the government's aim at preventing foreign surveillance of its citizens. Now, after this, let us look at some of the concerns which are related to the issue of data localization. So, the first concern is that it is likely to increase the compliance cost. Now, presently, the Indian companies are storing their data in servers which are located in other countries, and that is very cheap in nature. However, if such norms are imposed, the likely compliance cost is likely to increase. This is mainly because of lack of digital infrastructure in India presently. So in order to comply with these norms, the Indian companies will have to create their own digital infrastructure, which is a costly and expensive process. And if the compliance cost increases, it is likely to reduce the profit margins of these companies, and it can overall impact the economic sentiment in the country. Further, there is again fear of monopolization of data. This is because if the data localization norms are imposed, even then the data will be monopolized by some of the big MNCs of the country itself. For example, if the data is being stored locally in India, even then this data will be monopolized by some big MNCs. And in such a scenario, the micro, small and medium enterprises will not be able to benefit from such a norm. Further, as the data will only be stored locally and its position and location will not be diversified, it increases the threats of cyber attacks. And if one such cyber attack destroys the data, there will be no more copies in other countries which is saved. And that is how it can impact the data through the cyber attacks. Further, the data localization norms cannot completely ensure the privacy issues. This is mainly because the data is still vulnerable to the cyber attacks. And even when the data is stored locally, the cyber attacks are difficult to prevent. And that is why it is not necessary that the privacy issues will be handled 100% by ensuring these data localization norms. Now, as we have seen the benefits and concerns regarding the data localization, the author has suggested that in the recent RCEP negotiations, the India should focus on ensuring the data localization norms. This is because it is important for India's political, economic and military interests. And if India is able to provide for these data localization norms, India's digital security would not be compromised. Thus, author says that India must retain its ability to formulate its own data policy space to shape its digital industrialization and digital future. And thus, India must proactively engage with RCEP members to protect its own interests and concerns. So these were few points related to the data localization, and with this let's take up the next article. Now this article on page number 11 talks about the maritime interests of India and China, and it argues that both have common concerns in the maritime areas. Further, the author has highlighted that India and China both are developing economies and both have paid importance to the maritime for trade and commerce. And in the recently concluded India-China Informal Summit in the Mamallapuram, which is also known as Chennai Connect, both the countries have highlighted the importance of maritime passageways in the Indian Ocean region. So now in this background, let us understand what has been India's standpoint regarding the maritime issues in the Indian Ocean region, and how has the Chinese factor played in this background. And finally, we will look at some of the suggestions which have been provided by the author for improving the maritime relations between India and China. Now, first let us understand India's maritime policy or its approach towards the maritime region. So, in this regard, if you look at the location of India, it enjoys a strategic position as far as its location is concerned in the Indian Ocean. Now, regarding the history of India's maritime policy, in the early 1980s and 90s, India was having close relations with the erstwhile USSR. Thus, any efforts which were made by India towards its military modernization were seen with suspicion by other countries which are bordering the Indian Ocean region. For example, countries like Vietnam, etc., were viewing India with suspicion because of its close relationship with the USSR. And all these countries thought that India is trying to dominate its position in the Indian Ocean region. Further, India was also building a joint service base at the Port Blair in Andaman and Nicobar. And this led to fears in the nations which were bordering the Strait of Malacca. So if you look at the location of Andaman and Nicobar Island, these are very close to the Strait of Malacca. So in this regard, the countries which border the Strait of Malacca, for example, Indonesia, Singapore, etc., were concerned regarding the India's creation of joint service base at the Port Blair in Andaman and Nicobar. Now, although these countries were viewing steps of India with suspicion, India acted as a responsible naval power, and it promoted greater transparency about its military modernization efforts. And India has shown in the past that it does not have any territorial ambitions in the region. And the main aim of India's maritime policy is of having a peaceful Indian Ocean region which can benefit the countries which are bordering the Indian Ocean region. And because of India's responsible behavior, there was a change in thinking of these bordering countries of the Indian Ocean region. And that is why these countries started engaging with the Indian Navy for the protection of Indian Ocean region. This is because the IOR is extremely important for the economies of these countries. So in this background, India has undertaken various regional initiatives for strengthening the maritime confidence building. And first in this line was the creation of Indian Ocean Rim Association or the IORA. And this was established in the 1997. Further, India undertook the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. It was established in 2008 and it includes several Southeast Asian states as the members. Further, the Sagar initiative of India, that is Security and Growth for All in the Region initiative, which was started in the year 2015, aims at strengthening the maritime connectivity and also aims at developing the blue economy. Further, India has also undertaken various ASEAN-centric initiatives. Here you should note that ASEAN stands for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So these nations which are located in the Southeast Asia are the members of the ASEAN. And India has undertaken various ASEAN-centric initiatives. And all these are focused on strengthening the regional maritime cooperation. And in this regard, India was one of the founding members of the ASEAN Maritime Security Forum in the year 2012. So all these initiatives highlight that India does not want to dominate the Indian Ocean region and also it does not have any territorial ambitions. Further, India has acted responsibly in the Indian Ocean region and which is mainly highlighted by the various initiatives that have been undertaken by India with its maritime policy in the Indian Ocean region. Now, regarding the India-China relations in the maritime region, both have followed a competitive naval diplomacy. Now, the impact of past relations between India and China is clearly visible on the maritime relations between both these countries. Now, we know that India and China have border-related issues. Also, both these countries were at war in the year 1962. And recently we have seen that there was a military standoff between these two countries at a location known as Doklam in the northeastern region near Bhutan. So all these events have had their impact on both countries' relation in the maritime region. And in this regard, both have tried to play a competitive naval diplomacy in the Indian Ocean region. So in this case, India has tried to intrude and increase its presence in the South China Sea, which is important for China. And on the other hand, China has also tried to intrude the Indian Ocean region, where it has been building up various ports like the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka and the Gwadar port in Pakistan. And this policy of China in the maritime region is famously known as the string of pearls policy. And by this, the China is trying to surround the territory of India in the Indian Ocean region by creating and developing various ports like Hambantota and Gwadar. So the author has highlighted that the maritime policy or the maritime relationships between India and China has been shaped by the events of the past, which were related to unsettled boundary disputes and also because of the hangover of the 1962 war. So in this background, the author says that both the countries need to show restraint and also develop mutual trust. Further, both the countries must respect each other's maritime engagements with the third parties and ensure that they do not impede into the rights and interests of other nations. Further, the weaponization of the Indian Ocean region must be avoided under any circumstance. Further, the surface and subsurface fleets should maintain safe distance from each other and should share information as much as possible to avoid any confusion. And this is also one of the confidence building measure between the navies of two nations. And finally, India and China and their Asian partners should aim to develop soft laws that fortify the ongoing development and conservation orientation of the global sea law. And if both the countries understand the interests of each other, then this will be a right step in the direction to further the Mamallapuram informal summit spirit. So by developing mutual trust and respect for each other, both these countries can further the aims and objectives of the informal summit which happened at the Mamallapuram. So these were few points related to the maritime relations between India and China. With this, let's take up the next article. Now in today's newspaper, there are 3 articles related to the nutrition and hunger. 2 articles are there on the page number 20 and 1 editorial is there on the page number 10. So we will take them one by one. So first one that is on the page number 20 is related to India's rank in the hunger index. And India's position in this hunger index has now slipped to 102nd. So out of the total 117 countries, India ranks at only 102 in the Global Hunger Index. Now this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2 under the topic Social Justice. So in the Global Hunger Index of 2019, India's rank has slipped to 102nd in the total 117 countries. And India's score is of about 30.3, which is under the severe hunger category. Further, India has been the worst performer in the one of the parameter which is known as child wasting and which is the highest for any country. And in comparison to its neighbors, Nepal stands at 73, Sri Lanka at 66, Bangladesh at 88, Myanmar at 69 and even Pakistan at 94 has fared better than India. So this reflects the grim situation of nutrition and hunger in India. So in this background, let us look at what is Global Hunger Index, what are the key parameters which are undertaken, and also who publishes this Global Hunger Index. Now regarding the Global Hunger Index, it is an annual report which measures and tracks hungers at the global, regional and the country level. And this is one of the important indices for achieving the Sustainable Development Goal of zero hunger by 2030. Now, important fact for preliminary is that it measures the hunger levels of countries based on 4 indicators, and these indicators have been clubbed under 3 dimensions. First is the undernourishment, second is the child undernutrition, which further has 2 indicators. One is the child wasting and the second is child stunting. And the third category or the third dimension is under 5 mortality rate. So it has total 4 indicators. The first is nourishment, second is child wasting, third is stunting and fourth is under 5 child mortality rate. Now what this undernourishment measures? So it measures inadequate food supply to entire population, which includes both children as well as adult population. And as far as India is concerned, about 14.5% of India's population is undernourished according to this index. As far as wasting is concerned, it is about 20.8% and stunting stands at about 37.9%. Further, regarding under 5 child mortality, it stands at about 3.9%. Another important fact for preliminary is that who publishes this global hunger index. So previously it was published by International Food Policy Research Institute or the IFPRI. However, from 2018 onwards, it is being jointly published by Wet Hunger Hilfe of Germany and Concern Worldwide. First one is a German-based private aid organization, while the second one is an Ireland-based international humanitarian organization. So both these bodies in collaboration publish this global hunger index. And if you look at the preliminary examination of 2016, you will find that a question has been asked on the indicators which are used in the global hunger index. And that is why such information becomes important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now after this, let us take up the next article, which is on page number 20, and there we will also look at the definitions or what is meant by these terms wasting and stunting, etc. Now this article on page number 20 is related to a study which highlights that the data for deaths which are caused due to severe acute malnutrition are exaggerated, and that is why interventions need to be modified. Now in this regard, the severe acute malnutrition has been identified as the major cause of under 5 deaths according to World Health Organization. And the WHO says that the deaths which are caused by severe acute malnutrition stand at about 10 to 20%. And accordingly, the World Health Organization has suggested the use of ready-to-use therapeutic foods, which are known as the RUTF. And these ready-to-use therapeutic foods should be provided along with complementary foods, which should be given to the children above the age of 6 months. However, the recent study has highlighted that these figures which have been provided by the WHO are exaggerated, and the deaths which are caused by severe acute malnutrition only stand at about 1 to 2%. Thus, the study highlights that there is a need for change in the approach for targeting low birth weight, and it should not rely on the RUTF or the ready-to-use therapeutic foods which has been suggested by the WHO. So first, let us look at the basic definitions of various indicators like wasting, stunting and underweight, etc. And also we'll look at the definition of severe acute malnutrition, and after that we'll look at the strategy to fight severe acute malnutrition. So the first indicator of malnutrition is wasting, and it stands for the ratio of weight for the height of a children. Now children whose weight is below the average for their height are considered as wasted, and it is an indicator for acute malnutrition. The second is stunting, which is height for age, and this includes those children whose height is below the average height for their age, and these are considered to be stunted. So stunting is an indicator of chronic malnutrition. And the third is underweight or the weight for age, and these are those children whose weight is below the average for their age. So wasting stands for weight for height. So the ratio of weight and the height should be proportional, and if that is not the case, it is known as wasting. Stunting is height for age. However, underweight is the weight for age. And these are the three important indicators which are used for measuring the malnutrition. Now, what is the status in India as far as the malnutrition indicators are considered? So, according to the National Family Health Survey, about 35.7% children below the age of 5 years are underweight, 38.4% are stunted, and 21% are wasted in the country. Further, there are other facts and figures. For example, 1 in every 2 women is anemic, 1 in every 3 children is stunted, and 1 in every 3 children is malnourished. Further, 1 in every 5 children is wasted. Now, all these are important data for your exam, and you can use them in your answers, and especially the one which has been released by the NFHS 4. After this, let us look at the severe acute malnutrition and what is the strategy to fight this severe acute malnutrition. So regarding the definition of severe acute malnutrition, you should note that it is one type of severe wasting and it is defined by a very low weight for a particular height. And this severe acute malnutrition significantly increases the risk of under 5 child mortality by almost 9 times compared to the well-nourished children. And according to the National Family Health Survey, there are about 93.4 lakh severely acute malnutrition child in India. Now, what is the strategy of the government to fight this severe acute malnutrition? So, the governments have created dedicated nutritional rehabilitation centers at the district level in various states. And these rehabilitation centers provide these kinds of interventions. For example, 24-hour care and monitoring of children, treatment of other medical complications like diarrhea, therapeutic feeding and locally available energy-dense foods. And also it focuses on counseling on appropriate feeding, care and hygiene techniques. So in this background, there is an increasing debate in the policy circles regarding the use of therapeutic feeding versus that of providing locally available energy-dense food. And this article highlights that the peanut butter, which is also a therapeutic food, should be avoided. So let us look at what is meant by this RUTF or the ready-to-use therapeutic food, and also what are the key results of this study which has provided the need for change in the intervention strategy to fight the problem of malnutrition. Now, these ready-to-use therapeutic foods are high energy density food which constitute a mixture of milk powder, vegetable oil, peanut butter and powdered vitamins and minerals. However, this new study indicates that the mortality rates associated with severe acute malnutrition is only about 1 to 2% as compared to the WHO released numbers that stand at about 10%. In this background, this study advocates a shift in the focus or the intervention strategy from the ready-to-use therapeutic foods to non-food preventive interventions like focusing on sanitation, health, clean drinking water and nutrition, etc. Further, the study indicates that most under 5 deaths occur within the first 6 months. However, these ready-to-use therapeutic foods are introduced only after the completion of first 6 months, and that is why the use of such RUTF foods is irrelevant in these cases. So in order to reduce the under 5 deaths in India, the study suggests that the focus should be on premature birth, low birth weight, and infectious diseases like sepsis, and not on these therapeutic food interventions. So these are few highlights of the study and some basics related to the nutrition in India. And further, this editorial on the page number 10 is related to the Comprehensive National Nutritional Survey 2019, which we have already covered in the Daily News Simplified of 14th October 2019. And we note that this survey had highlighted the role of maternal education in improving the nutritional status of the children. So you can go through that video. However, the gist of this editorial will be provided in your PDF. Now after this, let us take up these practice questions. The answer will be displayed after 5 seconds. The first question is that the global hunger index is released by which one of the following? So the correct answer is D, that is Wet Hunger Hilfe and the concern worldwide. Second question is which of the following indicators are used in calculating the global hunger index? So all the three are correct, hence the correct answer is D, 1, 2 and 3. Third question is which of the following cities is located at the tip of Strait of Malacca? So the correct answer here is Singapore. And finally, which of the following is closest to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands? So here you should note that Sumatra is the closest to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. With this, we conclude today's discussion. Now let's take up the question for the day.